Welcome to Part the System, episode 32 with Elaine Heaney. How are you going, Elaine?
I'm good, thanks, David. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Really excited to speak to you today. So thank you for your time. But before we get into it, I just want to share with the viewers a little bit about your bio. So you're just going to have to sit there for a second. So today I've got Elaine Heaney, who, yes, is the National Manager at Play by the Rules, which is a national government and non-government initiative that promotes safe, fair and inclusive sport. So Play by the Rules is a unique collaboration via a partnership including Sports Integrity Australia, Sports Australia, the Australian Human Rights Commission, the State and Territory Equal Opportunities Commission, the State and Territory Departments of Sport and Recreation, the Office of the Children's Guardian and the Anti-Discrimination Board of New South Wales. Now, Elaine, that's quite a lot of stakeholders.
Well done, getting the list right.
Yeah, the program provides, Play by the Rules provides educational and training resources for the sporting sector, which you can find on their website, which we'll mention a little bit later. Now, Elaine's new to the role, I think about 6 months, but originally from the UK and got a really interesting background, which includes working as a solicitor in both the criminal and work health safety law, and most recently in the policy sphere as the Child Protection Officer for Scouts New South Wales. And during that time with Scouts, Elaine specialised in safeguarding policy and implementing the recommendations of the Royal Commission. And this work resulted in the Scouts New South Wales campaign Know It, Live It, Log It, which was shortlisted for a communication award, and must have been an unbelievable experience, that, Elaine. So thank you for your time this morning, and we'll get straight into it, shall we?
Yeah, of course. So lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right. So well-being, big topic at the moment, but what does it mean to you?
I think that's such a great question because it covers so many different facets of who we are as a human. I think it's something that I've struggled with a lot throughout my life. I've had a lot of health issues that I've kind of had to deal with and overcome that I'm more than happy to talk about. But I think the older I get, the more that also comes to me is it's about balance in life. I think it's not just about physical activity and pushing yourself to the limit, and it's not just about your mental well-being and making sure that's okay. It's about the whole cohesive ecosystem of you as a person. And so trying to find that centered place where you're happy and healthy in your mind and your body to the best that you can be, which is, different for everyone and different at different stages in your life. That's what I guess I'm always aiming for. And the good thing is you can never quite reach it. So you're always striving, which is also a great place to be.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say it's an aim, you're always trying to get there. So yeah, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's just something that I'm a big believer in self-improvement. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, any kind of self-help books, things that you can look towards understanding who you are as a human and then how that comes out in different aspects of your life. So, on a personal level, for me, I've had back issues. I've got alopecia. So alopecia is an immune system disease, which means that your immune system attacks the follicles in your hair, and all of my hair fell out 5 years ago. So it's actually a disease I've had for 20 years, but that was the biggest time in my life when that happened. And as you can imagine, I think I was 18 when I was first diagnosed with it, having that as part of my life has always been a struggle. Being a young female and dealing with hair loss, it's just something that was a difficult thing. And then when all of my hair fell out a couple of years ago, and I wear wigs now all the time, and I'm pretty used to it and happy to speak about it. But it's just been something that I've had to mentally work through as much as, the reality of my life. And I've also had some back issues as well. So I think that combination for me of trying to find that centered place has been a lot to do with yoga and meditation and well-being and centeredness and acceptance. I think acceptance of who you are as a human is the biggest lesson that I've learned in my life. And then for me, that complements with trying to find a job and a vocation that sits in my values and means that I'm passionate about it. And so I feel really lucky that I've managed to find a space to work in and people like you to work with a subject matter that I care about. So it's all of those things kind of meshed in together that's, you know, throughout my life has been different at every stage, and I'm still always working on today.
Yeah. Sounds like you've found your purpose with Play by the Rules, but I'm just gonna pull it back a little bit, if you don't mind, and dig into, you know, your journey there with alopecia, because you certainly live in the Brené Brown kind of philosophy with vulnerability, with, you know, being open to talking about this, Elaine. But what, I mean, in terms of you having to deal with that, you know, I'm worried about losing my hair, and I'm a male. I know it's going a little bit on one of my sides, but yeah, how did you cope with that, you know? And yeah, just unpack that a
Yeah,
bit.
I think all day, every day, it's different. You know, it depends on what mood you're in and how you're kind of dealing with your life and what's going on. So I'll have great days when I don't even think twice about it, and I just carry on with life as normal. And
Yeah,
then days when it really is upsetting and hard, and you feel like it's a barrier or an obstacle.
yeah.
At times people can either not see it because they don't realize, so they don't know that you've kind of had to kind of get dressed for a meeting or work around things, or going swimming I find really hard just
Right.
to deal with that. Or when it is showing, because if I don't have my wig on, then people naturally will ask questions or assume you've got cancer, or, you know, lots of different assumptions come into the mix, which I understand. People are people. But sort of having to deal with other people's energy around
Mm,
can be quite tiring sometimes as well,
mm,
because it's either a brand new topic that people are interested in and so they want to know more, or it's something that they've got a view or an opinion on and so they would like to offer help or a remedy, which is delightful and so well-meaning. But if you've had a long day at work and you've had this for 20 years, sometimes
yeah,
that home remedy is not what you want to hear in that moment. So I
yeah.
think, again, it's just a balance that I've had to find throughout my life of when I want to talk about it, when I'm happy to talk about it, and, you know, seeking support from different areas of my life. So friends, family. I've got a great alopecia support group with the Alopecia Federation, and all of those things just help you, I think, to just work through what it
Mm,
means to you, and how to deal with it. And I think I always just feel incredibly lucky that it doesn't have a physical impact on the rest of my body.
mm,
So compared to cancer, for example, you know, it is, you have to remind yourself that it's just a visual thing.
mm,
But then I also try to not push that down to be something that isn't important, because psychologically it does have a big impact on a human because of
mm,
our society, because of the expectations around beauty standards and everything. It can be a really tough subject sometimes, and I think a lot of humans understand that point of not feeling like you fit in.
mm.
We're sold the beauty standards, and if you don't feel like you fit in with that expectation, then that can be a hard place to be. But as you get older and you read more and you learn more, I try and accept that the human I am inside is the most important thing to me. And if I'm a good human, living a good life and helping others, then that's really my main goal.
Yeah, incredible. And I think that work within is obviously really important. Sometimes the most important work to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think with people maybe that have struggled with it when they meet you, I think sometimes they project their own uncomfortableness onto you, you know,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely. And everybody's got something, you know, everybody's got something that they're worried about or concerned about, or
yeah.
I think that's why, from an inclusion perspective, which, you know,
Mm,
you and I sit, the reason I wanted to share this today was to say, I think people will often sit there and think I'm the only one. And it's
mm,
not true. I think actually every human has something that they're worried or concerned about. And if you can get to that point where you realize that we should all just be accepting each other for who we are and being who we are, then that's the ideal world. But I also acknowledge that that's easier said than done.
Well, Elaine, thank you for sharing that, and you've been so open. That was amazing. Really, yeah, really grateful. And you've certainly a role model. And I think it gives you a deeper level of perspective, you know, going through what you have done, particularly around the inclusion work, like you say. So, um, yeah, and bringing that to play by the rules. Tell me a little bit about Play by the Rules.
Yeah, of course. So the tagline for the Play by the Rules program is safe, fair, and inclusive sport. And the idea is really that it just means that sport and recreation, so we want to make it wider than just sport. It's any kind of movement that helps you in your life, is a safe space for the people who are participating, is a fair and just place, and is an inclusive place as well. Most importantly for me, that last one is probably what I would like to focus on. And for me, that means if you're standing in the values of who you are as a person and your club and your sport, who do you want that to be to the rest of the world? And if that's a welcoming place, and a place where everybody can come and try something new and be welcomed and respected and spoken to nicely, then that's the kind of community that I think we should all be striving towards. And I think it exists already in many, many ways, but I think there's always tweaks and things we can look at and reading we can do and work on, all of us as humans, to make those spaces more useful to the community as a whole, I guess, as well, and just to make sure people don't feel excluded. So Play by the Rules essentially came from a homophobic incident in South Australia 20 years ago. And so the sport involved who had to deal with that incident spoke to their local Human Rights Commission and said, can you help us? Which I think was such a great thing for them to do. And so the Human Rights Commission provided some education on LGBTQ plus issues, and sort of made sure that, as well as the actual incident being dealt with, there was broader education around the subject.
Yeah.
And since then, it just grew and grew. And essentially now every state and territory is involved. So it's every human rights agency and every government sport and rec department, which I think is so amazing to know that everybody has agreed to be in the same place. And then we've got this wonderful website with all of these resources and articles and free online courses, all about harassment and discrimination or child protection or inclusive coaching. So it's lots of practical ways that you can bring that inclusivity into your life, into your club, and into the way that you operate. I hope that summarizes it all.
Absolutely. And I actually didn't know that, Elaine, that it came out of an incident 20 years ago. And I love the fact that, there was obviously this unfortunate situation, but from that, something good has come out of it. And, with all these resources and education, bringing all these people together. I mean, I'm fascinated by that. Talking through your bio there in the beginning, how do you manage to bring all these different personalities and perspectives and agendas together, I suppose on a common purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the job, and certainly something that both excites and terrifies me equally.
So that's a good thing.
Exactly. I think common purpose is the main thing that you have to kind of focus on. And that's what, again, I love the fact that I'm already in a position where there's a program where 20 different government agencies have already committed to the ethos of Play by the Rules. They all want to see safe, fair and inclusive sport across Australia. And I think when you start from that platform, like, that's just incredible. So already knowing that you've got that buy-in is really important. And one of my first jobs, taking over from Peter Downs, who was the previous manager, was to understand his network and then to try and start that job of working my way around to everybody. So I've now spoken to every single one of those stakeholder teams, and it's been wonderful just to meet everybody across the country, see what everybody's doing, hear what they would like from Play by the Rules as a program, talk about maybe some of the issues with the program and some of the courses and everything as well, because nothing's ever perfect, and just to look at ways that we can improve going forwards, for everybody's sake, basically. So I think the biggest lesson I would take from managing stakeholders is listening. I'm certainly a talker. I love to communicate and I love to meet people. But in this situation, in this role, I think to get the maximum benefit for everybody, I've got to listen and I've got to understand who they are and where they sit and what their needs are as an organisation, as an individual, and then try and make sure that we're taking that into account and accommodating everyone. And of course, you can't please everybody all the time because that's not life. But I think if you can listen and then explain to someone why you're taking a step, even if they don't agree with it, and you do it in a polite and respectful and considerate way, then that's the way forward. And I've had a couple of different jobs that have helped me to get to that point. So I ran the criminal law committee for the Law Society. So I had 25 criminal lawyers, all with different opinions, and I had to corral that and put those into policy papers. So I think that gave me a good experience there. And then also working at Scouts and doing the child protection work there, every day, speaking to different people from all different walks of life and helping them to translate policy to make it something that's meaningful for them and practical, which is my passion as well. You can have complex legislation, but if it doesn't mean anything to people who are on the side of a soccer pitch or playing cricket at the weekend, then it's not helping the community, and my job is to help the community.
It seems like your experiences and the roles that you've had have kind of all navigated you to this role, really, because I think having that grounding and within policy and child protection and going through I would imagine some of the issues that you've had, Human Rights Commission, stuff like that, has really give you a good platform for this new role, Elaine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny you say that, because it was so crazy when the job came up that it really seemed to speak to all of the different facets of my experience and my personality, to be honest, as well, to be something that I'm passionate about and where I can make a big difference, because the reach of the programme is massive. But doing something where I understand process, I understand complaint handling, I understand safeguarding, and I'm not just the lawyer that sat in the office and could understand the rules. I've also been the person on the ground teaching people and dealing with real life issues. So I hope that people will understand and appreciate that I bring a really practical, on the ground experience to this role as well.
Yeah, I suppose the authenticity comes with that as well, because you're comfortable at the policy strategic level, but then you're on the ground and can deliver the programs as well, and with speaking with all the different stakeholders. And I suppose looking at it from a systems perspective, with all these groups that you've been speaking to, and you've taken the approach of listening, it's the first part of your role. What's been some of the emergent things that have come out from a systems kind of point of view? So what you maybe didn't expect?
Yeah, so interesting. I think learning about how the system works is really important, first of all. So the federal model in Australia, being British and coming into it, I think you have to have a real respect and understanding for the systems that already exist, the way the NSOs sit, the way that the state organisations sit, and then understanding what it's like to be a community club on the ground, and how difficult it is for everybody to navigate the laws and the policies and everything in this area. The reason that those laws and rules and policies are in place are all incredibly important. But on the flip side, to be the person who's trying to meet all of those obligations is really tough position too. And so trying to balance all of that up, I think is really interesting and important, and trying to step back sometimes and see things from the national level, but also try and step in and see it from the local level as well, and then see how we can kind of bridge those gaps. I think complaint handling is obviously a huge issue for many people across Australia, trying to deal with people who have a different view on a situation, just because of probably their background, their education, their personality, their views towards any given situation. I mean, I certainly found at Scouts you could have one situation, and if you asked 5 sets of parents, they would all have a different view on how they would like their child to have been looked after in that situation. And so you can't please everyone all the time, and I think having an understanding of that is important. So the complaints handling process is certainly something that we're kind of looking at, trying to provide resources and support to organisations. Obviously, the National Integrity Framework is now being brought in to try and give a level of independence to some sporting organisations if they want to sign up to it. But I think it's also really important that volunteers have access to some resources if they're dealing with a club level issue. There's many different issues in sport in Australia, and they can range from I'm not happy about the uniform to very serious criminal matters. It's literally everything in between. And I personally think the hardest job for everybody is to triage all of those effectively, make sure it goes to the right place and the right person, and have a process in place to deal with things that come up. And so hopefully what Play by the Rules does is provide some good resources to help people. If they can do our online course, which teaches them about how to handle a complaint. Equally, there's resources there for a parent who might want to make a complaint. There's both sides. I think you can really help people with that. But I think going forwards, there's going to be a lot more investment and resources into that area. And then the second one is obviously safeguarding. And that's where, it's great for me because I have some really good, clear experience that I can bring to the table, is trying to help people to understand that, out of the Royal Commission and everything that came from that we as a country, as a nation, as a community, need to really reflect on what those outcomes were and what that means for all of us, and take the time for yourself to understand what it means and what you can do, and how you can make everything a safer place, especially for kids, obviously, more than anything. So I think anything I can do to help people in those areas, is great, but always lots to do, always lots to work on. And I think just trying to take those complex things and make them simple and practical is the biggest challenge. But what people need. So
so you're definitely working with like an adaptive, complex system with things changing all the time. So we've got a pandemic at the moment. Maybe new legislation comes out. There might have been a child protection issue or whatever it is. So from listening to you, part of your role is to take some of these issues and basically simplify the process and support for clubs or whatever. But there's so much to do, and from just listening to you in terms of what you've got on your plate. But what does the next 6 months look like for you in terms of like what are you excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I talk to people a lot about is, for example, with the national principles coming in, everybody just gets really terrified and, really, how can we overnight make sure that our club completely complies with all of the national principles? And I think it's really important that everything has to be just a step-by-step process. You can't achieve the world overnight. Everyone has resource restrictions, everyone has capability restrictions, and I think really knowing what you've got to work with, and then looking at what you're trying to achieve and then making a plan is the best way to start. Make it bite-sized chunks and make it achievable, because if you don't make it achievable, then you're just going to get overwhelmed and not able to do any of it, and that doesn't help anybody. So that's certainly what I've done with Play by the Rules. Is I've probably spent the first 3 to 6 months just learning, understanding, listening, knowing what the program is. I've then put together a strategy, for the next 12 months to the committee. And so a few of the things that we're looking to do is to try and put out a campaign at some point that starts to talk about safeguarding issues and starting to talk and having a conversation, but that hopefully will also be supported by good resources there for people. We want to do an evaluation of the MPIO programme, just again to listen to everybody. MPIOs are such a valuable part of sport, so they're member protection information officers, and they are essentially the first person that someone will come to when they have an issue at club level. And
just on that for the viewers, does every club need to have one of those?
Yeah, so it's not mandatory, but obviously it's a great thing to have. If you think about, if you're in a club situation where you have accountability, or you're looking after children, you just want to be educated. I think you want to be in the best position for yourself to be able to deal with, situations that come up. So the idea of the MPIO training is that someone's gone on to Play by the Rules, they've done the online course, they actually do a face-to-face training in their local state and territory department too. And then they've got an understanding of this is when someone comes to me and says this, I make sure I take good notes and I send them in the right direction and I triage them to the right person. And so I think that's the great thing about Play by the Rules is it's all help,
Yes.
everybody in that situation, if you don't know what to do or how to react, you just want some help from someone who's done it before or been through it before. And Play by the Rules is like a big book of help.
That's a good way. I like that analogy. And with that course, it's free. That anybody within a club can jump on, and then if there is an issue around child protection, they know they might need to phone the Office of Guardian and log an issue. So yeah.
It's knowing where to send people in the right direction, really. And so if you've done the course and you've looked at the resources and you've understood it within your environment, then obviously you'll just have a better idea of, okay, when this happens, I'm going to send you here, or this happens, I'm going to send you here. And that's been my job for the last 10 years, essentially is trying to go, okay, here's the issue, work out where it sits, and then where does it need to go?
Yeah, you're conduit in terms of
exactly. And Play by the Rules is probably the ultimate version of that, because on a national level, you sit here and you understand the kind of landscape, and you can put people in touch with people and send them to the right information. But yeah, the website is a wealth of unbelievable resources. So I really encourage everybody to just log on, take a look at the free courses, but look at the resources. We have the Let Kids Be Kids campaign, which came out last year as well, and that was brilliant. It was talking about sideline conduct, essentially. So when you have parents who stand at the sideline of a match, trying to be polite and respectful to everybody, and remember that there's kids playing. Essentially, it's not necessarily the Olympics, and that those kids just want support and help and encouragement. And that if you get too invested to the point where your language gets away from you or your temper gets away from you, that's not helpful actually to anyone. It's certainly not helping your child or other children. And I talk about being a role model a lot. When you're a parent at the side of a game, you're a role model for those kids, because you're trying to show them this is how adults deal with this situation. And so we can have good role models and bad role models. And I think we need to be very clear that we are modeling what we expect to see, that it's not anything goes, that there is a level of conduct expected from anyone at any sporting event. And so if you're in a role as a parent or as someone who's just, attending and watching, you still have a role to play, and you still have expectations of you in that event and that environment. And I think it's really okay for people to say that to others as well. This is a situation and there's expectations.
Yes, code of conduct, isn't it, for parents? And it goes back to what you were saying before, Elaine, about we're talking about going within, and managing emotions. And I remember from my football development days in England, and parents, like they're the worst. They can be, they're living their lives through their kids and putting so much expectation on. So.
And also acknowledging, though, that the reason that people get frustrated and lose their temper is often for things going on in their own life. I think just not writing someone off as well and saying, oh, well, you're just an idiot because you can't control your temper. Like, obviously, something's happened today. You're probably not in a good space, or you're tired, or you're fed up, or your business has got an issue. And not to say that you need to go into that with every single person when you don't know them, but I think having that empathy for the other humans, to know that most often, in my experience, when something bad happens, there's a driver to that. I personally don't believe that humans are intrinsically evil. I think it's a lot of situational and environmental factors. And so I think just trying to understand that in that situation, the best thing to do is to take a step away, give everyone a minute to calm down, and then have a conversation, maybe even at a later date around it. It's definitely something I learned from managing events and complaints and people, is if you try and deal with it that second, you're likely to cause more issues. But just, at the same time, it's important that people understand that there's expectations and codes of conduct in all environments.
Yeah, I hear you. And if we just move it along to chronic disease, Elaine, so 1 in 2 in Australia have got a chronic disease, and it's getting worse. And think about the pandemic as well. If we could nudge one part of the system, to improve the well-being of Australians, what would that be for you?
For me, I think that's mental health. Essentially, we can't stop people from dealing with disabilities, disease, anything that comes your way as a human that's going to cause you an obstacle or a barrier. No one can change my alopecia for me. So I have to work through that as a human and accept it. But what other humans can help me with is me processing it. And I think that dealing with any kind of issue is hard, even just to begin with. You throw in a global pandemic on top of it and you restrict people and you don't have your normal outlets. I know for my back, like not being able to have a massage, something that just really builds tension for me. And so just simple things like that, or not being able to go to the pool for my arthritis or anything else. So I can't do those because of the current situation, and that has an impact on me. So if we have more resources where people can work through, talking to someone about it or finding another way, through that, I've got to do my exercises at home and I've got to be better at trying to find different ways to soothe myself. And I can do a lot of that myself, but also it's great when you get help to do that. And I think I actually looked at an ABC article that was talking about calls to Lifeline in the pandemic. And they said that on 3rd of August, they had 3,345 calls just on one day, and that was their highest daily number in their history. So mental health is already was a huge issue for people who have challenges and obstacles, and especially if you've got a disability that really impacts your daily life. It's another level of dealing with that. And then having a pandemic and having restrictions on top of that, as I said, it's only going to put people in a place where they're struggling. And so I think acknowledging that to begin with is a great place to start. You can't fix it overnight, but if everybody just kind of goes, it's okay that we're not okay at the moment. There's lots going on. It's been a very difficult year or 2 years. There's a lot of restrictions that we're all facing, but all, for good reason. And I always sit here and just thank my stars for, having a healthy family. And I think if you're in that situation, you've got to just start from that point. But then you're going to have a bad day and you're going to be upset and you're going to struggle with things and find stuff hard, and that's okay. But reaching out to people, the resources are there. So I think the more funding and resources and everything we can put towards helping people to deal with the challenges they face, you can't change it for someone, but you can help them to feel supported. Okay.
Yes, and you add in things like what's going on in Afghanistan at the moment, and I know there's a lot of refugees over here, and it's like things that are just out of your control. Exactly. How to deal with that, but reaching out to people and connecting, I think, is just so important, isn't it? And during this time, there's so much going on in the world. It's crazy.
Definitely, and it's overwhelming for everybody. So I think just being kind to yourself and understanding that is really key.
Yeah. And I suppose in terms of mental health, what has Play by the Rules got any resources around that type of stuff?
Yeah, certainly. So we've got quite a few articles on the website that you can have a look at. There was certainly something that I shared on the Facebook page the other day that was about a coach who was talking about why do we have an expectation that everybody will be this level of mental resilience, that to be strong and tough is almost something you're born with. It's not true. It's because someone via their education or their background or their privilege even, that has taken them to a place where they've built up some skills that help them to deal with tough situations. And so I think if we can think of it like that as well, that the more skills and education we can give to people to help them to deal with that themselves, and that's a better way to be. And obviously the focus on, for example, the Human Rights Report about gymnastics, talking about making sure that winning at all costs mentality, for example, does not continue, because that's not an appropriate way to deal with humans in a sporting environment. I think having an understanding that kind of being tough, winning everything, kind of full-on mentality, I'm not saying there's not a place for that. Of course, people want to, train hard and achieve things. But if you did that by being understanding of all of the humans involved and helping people on the journey whilst you do it, I think for me that's a better way through.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some like unbelievable changes around this stuff. If you think about the Olympics, I know the Olympics was just a warm up. We've got the real, we've got the Paralympics coming up soon, which I'm super excited for. But gymnastics with I think it's Biles and Osaka. Like what they've done recently, Elaine, in bringing awareness to mental health. I think it's that there's definitely a shift around this stuff.
Yeah, and I think for me that's about creating that safe space so people feel like they can talk, and that's what both of those women did in such an unbelievably amazing and strong way. With Naomi Osaka at that point in time taking that moment to say, I need a minute, and for Simone Biles with everything that she's been through, to just say, look, it's not safe for me or for others, and it's not right for me at this moment. Having that courage to say it is incredible. But also what we need to do is create the space for everyone so that everyone feels like they can say that at any time. You should always be able to say, as a human right now, this is not for me, and take a step away, take a break, take a moment, whatever you need. It's about you. And I don't think anyone should be placed in a situation where they're pressured to do anything that it isn't okay for them.
Such a important topic to talk about, and I'm really pleased you brought that one up in terms of chronic conditions. And I think we're on a bit of a cliff, aren't we, in terms of where things are going with this, because with the pandemic, but I think people are talking about it more and it's more acceptable.
And I think it comes back to reasonable adjustments, doesn't it? Which we're all familiar with in the inclusion space. And if you've got any kind of disability or condition, that reasonable adjustments is what your life needs. Well, so we as a whole society all the time make reasonable adjustments for each other. Why does it have to be disability orientated? It actually should just be for everyone all the time, in my opinion.
Great. And this leads me to my last question, Elaine. It's gone pretty quick. Where do you see yourself in the system, and how do you contribute and influence it?
So great question again. I think the great thing for me is something happened recently, which has given me a really wonderful way to look at that. And that's us winning the Olympics for 2032. I mean, what
you're saying we now. So are you an Australian? Like, I need to get this right. Sorry.
I got my passport 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations. So, yes.
Right here.
That's good.
So, I'm now a dual citizen, which is really exciting after 8 years. I am Aussie, even though the accent might not give it away. I probably shouldn't take any responsibility whatsoever for winning the Olympics, because that's not me. But I was one of those people who was whooping and cheering and so unbelievably excited when that announcement came out, just on a kind of personal level for the country, and because I love sport and the Olympics and the Paralympics. But to know that that's going to be coming here at a time when I hope I will still be working in sport and working in this arena, is just very exciting. And so, but what it does on a more practical level, and I've talked to a lot of people in the sporting community about this, is gives us, a pathway. If we say, so when we reach the 2032 Olympics, what would the most diverse and inclusive environment look like? What would be the perfect way that we could pitch the Olympics out to the rest of the world and the Paralympics, to show that we, from a culture point of view, from a diversity point of view, from an inclusion point of view, we are the most diverse and inclusive nation in the world, is the dream. And then what are the steps we need to get there, and how can we spend the next 10 years working on that journey? And that makes me really excited. We've got Basketball World Cup, FIFA Women's World Cup in the meantime.
2023,
Exactly. Golden decade is what everybody's already talking about. So
I haven't heard that. Is that what we're calling it now?
Yeah, that's what I've heard it called.
Like that.
So there's just so much opportunity and possibility. And I think that again makes me very passionate.
Yeah, great. And is there anything else that we've missed that you want to touch on?
I think just to really reiterate that for me, Play by the Rules is about recreation as well as sport. I really want every single person who's watching watching this in the community to know that when I'm doing my job, I'm doing it for everyone. This is not about elite sports, and it's not even about Paralympians who might have some level of privilege in their equipment and their funding. It's actually about everybody just getting outside and moving or doing some kind of motion or recreation, or even if it's mental, anything that helps you as a human, for me, is sport and recreation as a whole. So don't get tied into believing that if you can't run a marathon, you're not a sporty person. I certainly was picked last for sports day probably throughout my whole childhood, and I found it was actually netball that I loved. And so team environment and some kind of shooting skill was more what I excelled in, but running around a track, I did not. So I think people can pigeonhole sport and can make it something that's unachievable when actually it should be achievable for everyone. Like, have a look, Google, look at some of the resources, find out what's out there. There's tons of resources, especially in an inclusion space, to make sure that if you have a challenge or a disability or anything else in your life that means it's a bit more difficult for you, then let's see what we can do to try and create an environment where you can access that.
Yeah, them reasonable adjustments that you talk about. And yeah, just echo that in terms of the educational and training resources. There's lots there. And I think the website is www.playbytherules.net.au.
That's it. Perfect.
Yeah. So encourage anybody to jump on there and reach out to Elaine if you've got any questions.
That's it. And we're always looking for new articles and case studies and, lots of ways to showcase what safe, fair and inclusive sport means to you as sport and recreation. If you've got an idea or something you'd like to see, please do send it through. There's a contact us form on the website. I'd love to hear from everybody. I can't promise I can do everything because resource limitations, but I'm certainly always here for the ideas and the articles and to read up and learn as much as I can. I think I'd just love to keep learning.
Yeah, well, I love your passion. You've certainly got big shoes to fill with Peter Downs, but it sounds like you'll be making him proud in these early stages. So, and thank you for bringing your whole self today, Elaine, and talking about some of the things that are very close to your heart as well. So, and
the legacy that Pete's put up is incredible. So I really want to acknowledge that as well. I didn't create the website with all the wonderful resources. I'm lucky that I get to be the torchbearer that takes them forwards. Certainly it's Pete who put in so much work and effort into everything that's there, and the legacy that's left is incredible.
Yeah, agree with that. So fantastic. Well, I'll let you go, and hopefully we'll meet in person one day.
Absolutely, look forward to it. Cup of tea.
English tea. All right, Elaine, thank you.
Cheers.
See you soon. Bye.